Welcome to the Environmental Justice Lab. My name is Dr. Leslie Joseph. Thank you so much for joining me. And we are quickly getting to the end of this year. And so I am preparing to go on my holiday break for the month of December. I'm excited about it. I get to spend some time with the family, do some shopping, do a lot of eating, and maybe take a few trips. We'll see how it goes, but it's going to be time for the holiday break. But I did not want to leave you without any episodes for the holidays. And so I wanted to share with you a conversation I had with two Palestinian engineers. One is a father, Dr. Hatem El-Sayeghs, and his daughter, Lydia El-Sayeghs. The father is an environmental engineer, and the daughter is a biomedical engineer. They are both Palestinian, and I had the opportunity to talk to them about the environmental situation and the issues and all that's going on in Gaza during this war that's taking place. It's been going on for well over a year now, and we had a great conversation. It was so good. We had to record 2 different times just to get all of our thoughts together and to really have the discussion we wanted to have. And so I want to share those with you over the next couple of weeks during the holiday season, because I don't want you to forget that the fight for justice, the fight for environmental justice, the fight to enable all of us to have and to enjoy this environment equally, it doesn't end when the holidays begin. And in fact, a lot of times the holidays are when we feel it most acutely, when we don't have what we need. And so we recorded these conversations a few months ago, and I've been editing them, and I've been kind of nervous about it. I wasn't sure when to put them out. You know, when I start talking about Palestine, start talking about war, start talking about environmental injustice as it relates to those kinds of things, I get nervous. And I'm not sure if I'm presenting the conversations well, if I'm representing the issues well, because I'm not as versed in them as I am with U.S. issues. But this is important information. This is an important discussion that needs to be heard and understood. And so I, over the next couple of weeks, will present to you our discussions. And so without further ado, I want to share with you a conversation I've had with the El-Sayeghs about environmental injustice in Palestine, not just during this war, but just in general, because it's been very difficult living life there, trying to raise a family there, trying to exist in a way that allows you to reach your full potential. And so please enjoy this conversation. I enjoyed having the conversation. And so without further ado, please enjoy part 1 of my conversation with the El-Sayeghs regarding environmental injustice in Palestine. Welcome to the Environmental Justice Lab. I am your host, Dr. Leslie Joseph. Thank you so much for joining us. And I say us because I have 2 very, very special guests with us today on the podcast. I'm excited for this conversation. I know you're going to learn a lot and enjoy it. We have, first and foremost, Dr. Hatem El-Sayeghs. He is a licensed professional engineer, an environmental engineer extraordinaire. I'm so glad that he is here. Dr. Hatem, how are you?
Better than I deserve, I will say. I'm fine. Thank you. Good to see you this morning.
Perfect. It's good to see you too. Thanks for being here. And along with him is his daughter, the beautiful Lydia El-Sayeghs. She is a biomedical engineer. Lydia, how are you this morning?
I'm definitely glad to be here. Thank you, Dr. Joseph, for inviting us.
No problem. Thank you for being here. And the reason I wanted you to come, I don't know, those of you who listen to the podcast may have known that earlier this year, I did a series of episodes on Palestine. I wanted to really think through the environmental injustices that have occurred, not just now, currently, but throughout its history. And I was so thrilled to meet Dr. Hatem and Lydia because they are both Palestinian, they are both engineers, and they are both very attuned and plugged into the environmental issues that are occurring in Palestine, and they agreed to talk to me about it. And so that is fantastic. Thank you so much for coming. And before we even get into all of those things, just tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, your upbringing, your connections to Palestine, and just paint the picture for all of us who have never been there, who don't know what it's like. Just share what you want us to know about yourself and about Palestine.
Absolutely. Dad, do you want to go first? You're a generation closer.
Well, I'll say, I come from a long history of family that has lived in Palestine, mostly in the city of Gaza. Um, Although my dad was an obstetrician gynecologist in Kuwait, he worked there for a long part of his life until he passed away. His father, my grandfather, was worked for the railroad, the British railroad system in Palestine before 1948. He was killed in the 1948 war. My great grandfather were mostly merchants and professionals, and so in a mostly a lot of agrarian farmer community, but they were more in the profession and in the mercantile. So yeah, I grew up actually. Part of my life was in Kuwait, but we would go in summers and visit our home in Gaza, in Palestine. It wasn't as often because travel has always been hard, and we had to get certain permits, and it wasn't easy to get them, and it cost a lot of money. But we always knew that it was our home. And in the Middle East, if you're born somewhere, you don't get the citizenship of that country. That's very different than the Western world. It's what your parents' citizenship is. So that was a sort of a different upbringing, but I've always loved to go back home. I've always seen Palestine, Gaza as my home, um, our family house there, and our relatives, and it was always a special time. Always wanted
Beautiful.
to go back, and
Yeah.
eventually did. Lydia.
Yeah. So to add to that, there's also my mom's side of the family. My grandfather from Gaza, also for many generations before 1948, and my grandmother from Jaffa, which is now known as Tel Aviv. Um, and we have family all over the land of that's now called Israel, and the West Bank and Gaza. And I've been lucky enough um, to go visit, and I'm sure I'll share more about what I saw. But I didn't, get to go to Gaza because there has been before this latest escalation a 17-year blockade, and so but that's where my grandmother is right now, and that's part of the reason that we're talking here today, because through her eyes we see so much of the pain and destruction and injustice that has always been there, but is being visited in really high genocidal volume on Gaza right now. So that's kind of the connection we have um, today, and I do hope that soon I'll get to go be with our family again.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing. That's a beautiful picture. And just for our listeners, in case you're unaware of the history, the reason the year 1948 keeps coming up in this discussion so far is because that is the year when the modern state of Israel was established. And in order to establish that modern state, and I don't know how you would describe this, Lydia and Hatem, but from what I've read and what I've understood, there was an expulsion of the previous Palestinian population to make room for Jews to come from all over the world, dealing with persecution all over Europe, all over different parts
Mhm.
of the known world at that point, coming to Israel, and
Mm,
the displacement of Palestinians from that land to create and establish that state
mm,
is the conditions under which a lot of what you're sharing has occurred. And so I don't want that to be missed by our listeners. There's history far
That's right.
beyond, October 7th or 2016 or 2014, whatever year you believe the conflicts have really ramped up. From the very beginning, there was a
Mhm.
lot of issues in this region. And I don't know if you would point to that establishment as the kind of beginning of that, but I know for me, just reading and trying to learn, I see that as a really major milestone
mhm.
Mhm.
from where things began to where we are today. So thank you for sharing that. I really, really appreciate it. And to
Mhm.
go along with that, we're in the West. I'm in South Carolina. I think you are both in Atlanta, Georgia. We're in the South. And I don't know about you, but the idea of the Middle East and Israel, Palestine, and the Arab world, the way I hear it in the news, the way I see it in the media, I'm pretty sure what I see and what I hear isn't really the case and doesn't really fairly represent that part of the world. And so I wonder from your perspectives, because I know for me as a Black American, I mean, when I see our depictions on TV, up until maybe the last couple of years, maybe since Obama was elected, the depictions have not been favorable, not been very kind, and very stereotypically negative. And so I wonder if you've had that same experience, just if you in movies or when there's news about, the Middle Eastern region of the world, or if you talk to friends or colleagues about what's going on. I would love to hear your perspective on what you see and how you experience that and what your thoughts are about the depiction. And we'll start with Lydia first.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. There's a wide uh, a wide range of like views and responses, but mostly what I experience in my daily life and in even media is, if there's not like some flare up, or Gaza's not showing up on the news, people actually are quite silent,
Mm,
avoidant of even acknowledging, or saying that someone is Palestinian is a dirty word, um, or when people ask me, where's your family from, um, after I say Palestine or Gaza, people are my experience has been that silence, and it's been, just a little, it's disappointing, because I love to take an opportunity to humanize and to share my culture, and just like anyone else, um, and then of course there's the extreme depictions of like terrorism, and just like this, once it does come out, Palestinians are equated with terrorism and violence, and whatever, like resistance groups that are fighting, like Hamas. So there's a lot
mhm,
of uh, I think people see me and they don't quite say it out loud to me as a young woman. I don't look like and as a Christian, I don't fit the stereotypes, but in media and if they don't know my background, I think that is the only like one dimensional uh, label put on Palestinians, in my experience, and there's lots of misconceptions, which yeah, I don't know if Dad, you want to add to anything that I said, but I can talk about some common misconceptions as well.
Yeah, no, I
mhm,
agree with that. there is a spectrum, but I've said it many many times before. The when you use the word Middle East, it is used as by the Western world as a shifting geography where there is trouble. That's how that's
That's
how I've
right.
said it. It's like
That's right.
where is the Middle East? Where is there is trouble and people look different. And so what I've seen is a range, but certainly I'm seeing more and more in this polarized political environment in the United States. And I'm not a political pundit, but I see it. It's obvious that there are two poles, that are pulling in different direction. That there is it has become a binary thing, so to speak. You're either good or bad, and if you're, you know, Palestinian, for the most part, you're bad. Um, and people fail to understand that, fail to apply the same um, principles, or guiding thoughts that they apply to other countries. We don't like the leadership, but the people, they are oppressed, they are suffering, or we don't like this subgroup, or that they are behaving in a manner inconsistent with human justice or mercy. But understand that there are people who didn't choose their leadership. So
Mm-hmm.
that's not afforded to Palestinians. We are, Lydia and I, our family at large, we are against violence. We don't support violence in any sort. You know, um, Human life is precious, invaluable. Uh, every person is created on the image of God. That's part of our faith, regardless of their ethnic origin or um, anything else. So we see it this way. And for us to defend every time, most of the time we have to defend the fact that we are Palestinian, if we are even giving the opportunity. If you say Palestinian, it shuts the conversation down. Or you know why do you support Hamas? It's like, who told you I do? Who told you I support this? And then I try to help them understand there are people. You're talking about millions of people, and you're just categorizing in them into one. And I'm sorry, this may not have addressed exactly your question, but the movies certainly have contributed a
Mm-hmm.
lot. Hollywood has been an instrumental part. The media has been an instrumental part. The media is definitely, um, it, most of the media is biased, but social media, good or bad, love it or hate it, has exposed a lot of different narratives that are challenging people. But at the same time, people have been carrying the narratives that they have been taught, and taking only what fits their narrative, and carrying it forward. Um, it's it's been as much a burden, um,
Mm-hmm.
to try to explain to people, to find those who are ready to hear, what does a Palestinian mean? What does being Palestinian involve?
Yeah, that's great. And then just to continue that train of thought, Lydia, you said you had some misconceptions that are
Yeah.
pretty common that you kind of wanted to address and kind of clear out.
Yeah.
Feel free to go ahead because I want to know, and I want my misconceptions to be cleared as well. So teach us something.
Absolutely. Well, there's just a few common ones that I wanted to point out this time, and that come up frequently in conversation or in media. And so, like, many people assume this is a religious conflict or a religious battle that's unending, or whatever. There's lots of different theologies around it, especially in the Western Christian world that we live in.
Mm-hmm.
And so people are often surprised when they find out that were Palestinian Christian, and that there is like a long history of Palestinian Christians, and that they experience the same. We experience the same discrimination that our Muslim brothers and sisters do, and so that's one aspect, that it's more of a political colonial conflict than, and the other is, aside along with that colonialism thread, it's not an equal conflict. It's one group has, if you just look at the facts, military and nuclear weapons. They extract resources and dominate and restrict the movement of another. They have all the civil liberties and self-determination that any people should have, while that group can arrest, kill, bomb, steal from the other at any point in time, and go unpunished. There's virtually no repercussions for when that's done by military or just regular citizens of Israel. And so and it can be even illustrated in the GDP, like 55,000 per capita per year for Israelis, and then for Palestinians it goes down to less than 5,000 per year. In Gaza, before the latest escalation, just like 1,200 per GDP, or around like per capita per year. So, but when we express this inequality and injustice, people find it hard to believe, and it's not the picture that they've received. And so it takes maybe a few times of sharing, or a few facts, or a few like articles, to truly to kind of, for them to believe us, I guess. And often we don't get that opportunity. And then the last, it kind of is relevant to our conversation here. There's this popularized notion that the state of Israel is making the desert bloom, or making the desert green. And I hear people excited about that. Some friends here in my own community, and there's some of the misconceptions around there is that Israel is diverting resources, water, and like the natural resources of the land from Palestinian areas to the settlements, or to these desert places. And actually, one aspect of this is over 800, you can see it in the trees, over 800,000 olive trees have been uprooted by Israeli authorities and settlers since 1967, when they took over and occupied the Palestinian areas. And for what remains, Palestinians are often restricted from accessing their land, and when they are harvesting olives, like that's a season of common attacks by settlers, by Israeli settlers in the area, and in a kind of green colonialism, which is a fascinating concept, not just in Palestine, but throughout the world, throughout the continent of Africa and so forth. But in this particular iteration in Palestine, over 250 million non-native, non-fruit-bearing pine trees have been planted in these settlements in Israel, Palestine, and it's just a picture of, like, this wasn't how it was meant to be, but it's a common, like, thing that people are excited about. Let's plant trees in the Holy Land, and it's actually quite harmful and reshaping the environment to be not the way that it was supposed to be. So there's a lot to unlearn and uncover with this, and so my encouragement is, if people can come visit and see, you can learn a lot that way. Always ask questions, and don't take any narrative that rejects the humanity of another person or group, because I think that just accepting narratives from media and from television and from just other people, it does create these misconceptions, and we need to, I encourage people to ask questions.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. So, and that leads us into our discussion about environmental injustice in Palestine. But before we get there, I have to push a little bit more, because I've never heard this term, green colonialism. I know that there have been campaigns, there have been movements, especially I'm a Christian also, so especially in the Christian world, we want to, in our minds at least, invest in what we call the Holy Land. And so the idea of planting a tree has always been the way that we've been taught to connect ourselves to that land, right? And so you have these campaigns, you can give a certain donation, you can give a certain amount, you can plant a tree, have your name associated with a tree, and you can kind of feel as though you're contributing in a positive way to this, like you said, desert land that needs life, that needs vibrance and vitality. We can actually participate and partner in that endeavor. And so when you talk about green colonialism, could you say a little bit more about what that looks like in Palestine and what it means? So you plant a pine tree, 1,000 pine trees. From our perspective here, it's green, it gives life. It, from a technical engineering perspective, it sucks in potentially harmful air pollution, and it contributes to a more beautiful area. And we
Hmm.
feel like we're a part of that. And so what you're talking about is the idea that that kind of intervention can be harmful and hurtful to the people that live there. And so how is that the case? And what would be a better way of investing ourselves in these areas?
Definitely. Yeah, I'm actually still learning about green colonialism in Palestine and in the wider region, um, because it looks different as like Western economies invest in specific types of like solar panels in the desert, and that don't quite work because they get covered with sand, and so there's some different, like, serving the energy needs or the responses to climate change in the West, serving them by exploiting the resources um, of countries that don't have as high income or so forth. So,
Hmm.
but specifically in Palestine, yeah, exactly. It sounds great to plant trees and to invest, and that's what I mean. I do that here with in, like, I think it's Trees Atlanta. I've planted trees, and but one thing we do is work out invasive species, because when you have like plants that are not meant for indigenous to the land, then it extracts resources in a way, or like in addition to pine trees, I think eucalyptus plants have been planted, and that's very water extractive in a place that,
Mm.
while still being luscious and producing olive trees and fruits and peaches and mangoes, it's still water is scarce, and so there are very specific things that the land has been just in a way designed for, that that bringing over pine trees from Europe isn't the what it was meant for. And so I think the response to that is, um, my encouragement is to trust Palestinians who have been indigenous to the land and stewards of the land and very agriculturally savvy. Actually, a lot of the times, um, Palestinian laborers are brought into Israel to work the land because they know best. And so, um, yeah, I think let Palestinians lead the way for care and teach others. I think that's just missing from, like, this idea that um, Palestinians have even intelligence about how to care for the land. Yeah,
Uh,
that's my thought. And
yeah,
Dad, go ahead.
yeah, and I'll add to this, the way the laws are manipulated over there and used to the benefit of one group against the other, from Ottoman laws that, if you don't cultivate the land for so many years, then the state has the right to confiscate it, and they confiscate it. And why weren't they able to cultivate the land? Whether it's because there is a wall or they can't travel to their land, and suddenly it becomes the state. And for a Western society, oh, they are dedicating or using this land as a public area, a park, and okay, and suddenly next time, in a few years, this park is converted into settlement houses for the benefit
Mm.
of a certain group against the other. So you see this from a Western perspective, oh, you're using land as a park for everybody's benefit. And suddenly, you have population growth, whatever that population comes from, even from outside the country. Now you want to build housing for the benefit of the people who are coming. Wow, another great thing. Leaving alone what this land was, there is a park that's called Canada Park. Um, in Israel that's built on the ruins of Palestinian villages. You go there,
Wow.
you see a beautiful park that's about 7 square kilometers, but who tells you the history of who was there and where that was built? You know, and that's something where you go there, you see a green park, but you don't see the history of the people and the villages, the people who lived there and the heritage for however many centuries they lived there.
Mm-hmm.
It's gone.
Mm-hmm.
But what you see is a beautiful park. Oh, this is green. This is beautiful. I went there. I saw this. And you come back with this idea, um, which again, it's to the benefit of one group of people
Mm-hmm.
and the
Right.
exclusion or the destruction of another, along with their heritage.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a very clear picture of what's happening and how these interventionist efforts can really damage a Palestinian community, a Palestinian area in ways that I guess for us in the West we would say is unintentional, but there is intentionality with every move that's made, and we have to be aware of the fact that nothing happens. These things don't happen by accident. These things are intentional, and there's a purpose behind them. And it's interesting to learn about them too, because I just would not have known these things. And so, staying on that same train of thought too, and the same environmental kind of concerns and issues, I'm curious. You're both engineers. You both have very intimate understandings of how systems work, water systems, wastewater systems, food systems, all these different types of systems. Have you been to Palestine or any of the Palestinian territories? Have you had an opportunity to kind of work on some of these types of issues and maybe use your expertise to try to enhance the quality of life there? And if so, how? And if not, why not?
Yeah, so I'll start. I've had the honor to work on um, wastewater and stormwater projects in the mid 90s in the city of Gaza under USAID,
Yep.
Agency for International Development. Um, on such projects, building stormwater uh, storage ponds and building a wastewater system, looking at the wastewater treatment plant for the city of Gaza and improving the facilities over there. Those are all um, things I worked on. Again, a U.S. government project funded by the United States. So I've
Mm-hmm.
seen those. I've worked on them and went even through challenges for one times like this plant was designed long time ago by an Israeli company because Israel it was controlling Gaza and then we look at the chlorine tank and it's like they are empty, we can't use them, you have to disinfect treated water before you discharge it into the sea. And it's like, why? Well, because chlorine gas chlorine is a hazard, or it could be used for other purposes. So there you go. You build the chlorine tanks, but there is no chlorine. You don't disinfect the water. This is just one of the things that intricacies or nuances that people here don't think. Well, you have a wastewater system. Well, we can't use it the way it was designed.
Mm-hmm.
And sadly, I've seen those things. I've seen them on the news being destroyed one after another in the current
That's right.
war, and it breaks my heart, and sometimes even breaks my heart that the source of funding for both the building and the destruction are the same.
Mm-hmm.
It breaks my heart. And I'll say something I didn't say earlier because I've seen a lot of people, educating about the situation there, pulling up a stool and a PowerPoint and speak with such authority when a lot of facts are just wrong. They use them as facts, they are wrong. I'll tell you,
Mm-hmm.
don't agree or disagree with me. You can agree or disagree. I just invite you to be curious. Check everything we have shared. Learn stories
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
make your judgment. Don't base your judgment or your position on, a 10-minute presentation by somebody who been there for 2 weeks, came with a specific narrative. Um, anyway, back to engineering. Yeah, Lydia, you want to say
Yeah.
something?
Go ahead, Lydia. What have your
Sure.
experience been like?
Yeah, I'm kind of young in my career. I'm a biomedical engineer by training, and I don't know if you can see it too, but there is so many needs in terms of medical devices and just a need for physical and mental healing and well-being in throughout Palestine, but especially in Gaza, obviously right now. So many. Just if you just think about the thousands of amputees,
Mm-hmm.
children who will need new prosthetics every they're going to be growing, and or like there's so many different aspects even outside of my engineering field of needs for therapy and that sort of thing. But so I see the need, and it's really where my heart is right now. I don't know what kind of opportunities there there will be to help. I'm looking for them, um, but really, what's most evident to me, in order to be able to like help come in with devices or design for what people need, um, we need a ceasefire, which is so
Mm-hmm.
basic to say, but healthcare workers have been being killed over and over and over, and like new patients are coming in every single day, just overwhelmingly and horrifically, um, in such bad shape. So and like supplies are so scarce. Anesthesia is so like almost like people, you know doctors complete amputations without anesthesia and without the necessities. And so there is so much need, and so much need being created actively through the
Mhm.
current uh, genocide that uh, you know I've seen my work, even though it's not quite engineering. It's is as to be an advocate and to ask for a ceasefire in order to be able to help, in order to make a way. Um, yeah, because I can't do one job if I don't do the first. And yeah, and the last thing I want to say is that um, there's not just engineers and capable people outside, but there's capable engineers and doctors and um, designers in Gaza itself, in Palestine itself, and they're being killed, and their families are
Mm-hmm.
being killed, and their projects that they've worked on have been destroyed. A relative of mine ran the like newly established cancer treatment wing at El-Ahli Baptist Hospital um, in Gaza, and that was one of the first things to be destroyed. And she worked years raising money and buying the equipment. So like these projects and these people are so capable and so
Mm-hmm.
smart and educated and able, um, but their lives and livelihood are being taken away from them because of who they are and where they were born. Um, so yeah, my ask first before anyone is able to help is stop bombing.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree. I've called for ceasefires numerous times on the podcast, and I've discussed, some facts and figures regarding, water quality, wastewater management, air pollution, air quality infrastructure in general. We don't have to revisit those things, but what I do want to ask you, and you mentioned this obviously earlier, but I want to just make it as clear as possible. From your perspectives, what do you believe? What do you think? How do you feel? What's necessary to correct these injustices, to correct all of the harm that has been inflicted on these populations. And I say populations because, I mean, for those of us listening, I mean, there's the Gaza Strip, there's the West Bank, there's East Jerusalem. They're separate and they're across that region. And so I imagine that there are different challenges in each of those areas. I don't want to just generalize too much, but what do you think actually needs to happen? Obviously, a ceasefire, obviously, releasing hostages, obviously, people going back to presumably whatever's left of their cities and homes. But once we get there, I mean, then what? The water's still dirty, the air's still clouded, there's no place to go if you're sick, there's no medicine, there's no food. What needs to happen to try to address those things?
Definitely.
Yeah. Everybody is talking about, well, a lot of people are talking about the day after and
Yes,
peace
the
and
day
two-state
after. That's right.
solution. And it's like, people are not ready to sign treaties. We would love to see peace. Lydia and I and the whole family would love to see peace and people living together in harmony and peace. But there is so much pain that has been um, caused, so much hurt that there needs to be this healing, this justice, this people want to be healed. People are orphaned, people are bereaved parents. There is so much on the human level that needs
Hmm.
to happen after a ceasefire, after a stop of the bombing and the hostilities. There is so much on the human level that needs to happen before we talk politics. It's
Hmm.
unfortunate, it's unfortunate, but politics and treaties are not the solution. Our world leaders who watched this for months cannot be the ones who broker peace right now.
I
It's the
see.
humans who have the mercy and the justice and the desire to heal um, people. That's what's needed. Shoulders to cry on, hugs, you know, doctors to replace the ones who were killed, teachers to replace the ones who were killed, people to tell the children it's going to be okay. I don't know. There is so much trauma. There is irreparable damage, whether from famine or from hunger, from the bombing, from the just the trauma. Um,
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah. No. So you're talking, I mean, I was thinking about how we always talk about rebuilding conflict, but what you're talking about is deeper than that. It's more of a societal, almost like a reorientation of what life is going to be like and
hmm
what life needs to become
yeah,
in
yeah,
order for there to actually be an opportunity for peace. Not even just, okay, we're done fighting, we get the people in the room, have a summit, and leave with a document that we agree will govern our territories and countries. You're
yeah.
talking about going in with healers and in with people who can touch on a human level to restore people's, I guess in this case, just sense of life and well-being and
Or
bring hope.
humanity, or
Yeah,
humanity even. I mean, those have been called human animals. Those
mhm,
people have been ignored. There needs to be a reversal of this dehumanization. When we care about one conflict in another part of the world and see these people are being bombed, or this children's hospital or whatever, but then in another conflict we say, well, it's those people who launched rockets from it or whatever. We try to justify,
right.
you know
Mhm.
okay, how are the people who justified my suffering as a person in Gaza are going to be the ones whom I will have to trust to bring healing, justice, and peace? Yes, there
Yeah.
is something very deep that this is different from other
Hmm.
situations that I've seen or I've known about.
Lydia, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think just taking it to the I love this. To me, it's a biblical idea of restorative justice, or a principle of
Mm-hmm.
restorative justice. And there's, it might be wishful thinking to say that Palestinians need reparations, or, um, you know, but really, you know, restorative justice is not is contrasted with retributive and punishment, and more killing and death. There is a need for like a lifting up the person who is higher and who has the rights and the capabilities and should be invested, just like we are very privileged in the US. I
Mm-hmm.
want to be invested in lifting up my downtrodden and hurt, um, uh, like fellow humans, whether they're in Palestine or Sudan or um,
Mm-hmm.
Ethiopia. Like there is, uh, I want to lift someone else up, and so I think my ask is that people trust Palestinian. When you offer trust so that they can trust you, let them lead. Um, just like we said, they're quite knowledgeable about the land and how to steward it. Um, Also very educated in like taking care of wounds and trauma therapy and those things. Um, Give them the opportunity to lead it. I'm very wishful. I know that the international community loves to get their hands into life there, but there is a deep, deep restoration feeling, and it starts or need and it can at least start with you and me as U.S. citizens, or
Mm-hmm.
you and me as just individual citizens of the world, um, to value and respect and hold in high regard this these fellow human beings of ours. So so much work to do, and like yeah, we mentioned that there's so many preconditions for that work as well, but that's the invitation, is to love and value, and uphold the well-being and rights of another person, that you you're not connected to, maybe.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. I mean, we're running out of time. I really appreciate all of this amazing knowledge and perspective that you provided for us. I want to end with this. So, all that we talked about in terms of what we can do and how it can look, like Dr. Hatem said the day after,
Hmm.
help me on a tangible, practical level, and our listeners as well. What would you say to us? You meet us, we're walking down the street, and we say, "Oh, Lydia, things are so bad over there. What can we do to help? How can we contribute to what you just laid out as a vision for the day after in
Hmm.
Gaza, in the West Bank, in these Palestinian territories?" What would you say to us in terms of what we could actually do, what we could actually go and physically accomplish that could actually be helpful in that endeavor?
Definitely, there are a lot of things, a lot of options actually that I've discovered. um, that can range from going and being with people who are suffering. I think that's a huge display of love and solidarity, and you can look up the international solidarity movement, or different groups that are inviting, like, um, people from the West to be in Palestine. um, but there's a basic thing that many of us in like the US or UK, who under these governments that are funding and providing weapons to this genocide, is to just, if you feel that there is something wrong here, then tell someone, tell the people
Mhm.
around you, but also tell your elected officials. Don't just, I mean, let them know that they don't automatically get your vote. um, Maybe I'm making a political ask here, but it's really essential, because humanity like depends on it. I think um, we have a lot of power being citizens of this, or participants in um, the sort of empire that we're in. And so,
Mhm.
um, yeah, I would encourage you, if you feel something's wrong, then tell people, and tell the people in power especially. But don't underestimate the power of your voice, because we can't do this alone. We can't just, I will go on as many podcasts. This is my first ever podcast, but yeah, spread the word, spread what you've heard, and read and ask questions, and tell.
Perfect. You heard it here first. That's what we can do. And I always say on the podcast, your voice matters. Your voice can make a difference. Your activism, your advocacy, it moves the needle. We've seen it in the United States with environmental justice action happening domestically. The same is true around the world. So you see something, say something. If you feel something, say something. If someone is hurting and suffering, say something. We have the ability, we have opportunities, and we have access now with social media, with different platforms to really reach out and be that voice. And the Bible talks about being the hands and the feet of Jesus, and we can do that in so many different ways with so much
That's right.
technology. And I'm excited. I know that it's a difficult situation now, but there's always hope, and there's always an opportunity to make things better than they currently are. So everybody go out and do that. Lydia, thank you so much for your words. Thank you for joining us on the podcast. Dr. Hatem also, he had to go back to work. Thank you for joining us as well. This has been an amazing conversation, Lydia. We are so thankful for your voice and for your contribution to this conversation.
I really thank you for using your platform and your space to hear from us. It means the world. Thank you so much.
And thank you. And thank you for listening. This is the Environmental Justice Lab, where we are for the people and for the planet. We will see you next time.